Hello, and welcome to the FinTech Times podcast, focused on discussing the latest FinTech topics and trends from around the world. Established in 2016, the FinTech Times is a global multimedia news outlet centered around the world's first leading FinTech newspaper. We report all the latest and brightest ideas from the FinTech world.
Hello and welcome. My name is Francis Bignell and I'm a junior journalist at the FinTech Times. Today we're talking about how payment localization in LATAM can drive success, and you can join the conversation at home by using the hashtag FinTechTimesPayLATAM. The Latin American market is notorious for its complexities, with each country dealing in its own currency and developing its own digital payment methods. However, unifying payment options can create new avenues for both consumers and merchants. One way of achieving this is through payment localization services. To help understand how these would benefit the Latin American market, I am here today with Jose Marti, Head of Global Sales at Pay Retailers. So, hi Jose, welcome. Thanks for joining me today on the podcast. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Perfect. Could you give me a brief intro about your company and your role within it?
Yeah, absolutely. So currently I'm the head of global sales for Pay Retailers. I think the best way to understand Pay Retailers is it's summed up quite well by our slogan, right? We are your payment processor in Latin America. So what we've done is that we've built an online platform, an online payments platform for online businesses that want to go into the Latin American market. So with one single integration, we're going to give access to over 250 local forms of payment within the Latin American region.
Perfect. And sort of on the topic of Latin America then, I guess, what are some of the preferred payment methods that we're currently seeing, and how will enabling sort of local payments help businesses?
Yeah, no, absolutely, right. So the Latin American market is quite complex. It's very different than, for example, the European market, in the fact that traditional credit cards and debit cards aren't really the most popular forms of payment for consumers in these regions. So we divide it into two different topics in alternative forms of payment, right? What you call online and what you call cash. Online bank transfers, for example, are quite popular. These are you log into your current bank and you're able to make a deposit through your online banking system. Then we also have cash options. So in this society that is quite cash heavy, we allow consumers to be able to deposit cash and pay with cash for online transactions. So each country has a different payment option that's popular within the country, and we with our single integration allow our merchants to accept these options. We're also seeing a new trend in what's digital wallets in Latin America. So there's not a lot of trust in the banking system. So a lot of the consumers on the day-to-day are using digital wallets to make purchases online. Now, how this affects your business, or how important it is, right, to have this, it just comes into tapping into this emerging market and opening up new channels of revenue for your online European business to be able to accept payments in such a big market.
Yeah, for sure. And like as you mentioned, there's a variety of different methods that you said in different countries. Each one's got its own thing developing and going off. Are there any examples really that you can think of that are really impacting and could help other countries, for example?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So if we speak a little bit about payment localization, right, and the whole concept of localization behind marketing, and you're trying to attack a new market like Brazil, for example. Let's use Brazil as an example, as it's one of the, I guess, the largest markets in the LATAM region. Just by I guess doing a translation of your website into Portuguese, in today's day, that's not going to be enough. You need the payments capabilities behind that effort into Brazil, right? So we're talking about a market where about 60% of online consumers are using a bank transfer method called Pix. So if you're not accepting Pix in Brazil, you're losing on a big chunk of your consumers, and that can ultimately lead to to less conversion if you don't have this payment option.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember I went to Lend It LATAM. I believe it was in November of last year. And I remember hearing about one of the panelists there. He was saying that he was able to pay and tip one of his movers. He'd moved house. And he was saying that he was able to tip the person using PixPay. And I'm just thinking, is this something that really could be moved into other countries as well? Is that Pix going to be sort of a global thing? Is it always going to be sort of a local Brazil thing, do you reckon?
and and that's the beauty and the complexity of the Latin American market, right? Each country kind of operates like a different planet in a way, right? We're talking about a region that has over 10 different currencies. So each one of the markets, for example, Pix in Brazil, the equivalent would be SPAY in Mexico, or PSC in Colombia. So each one of the different countries in Latin America have adopted their quote unquote picks in Brazil, right? To make it easy. So that's where the importance of having a platform like a PSP like Pay Retailers is that with one single integration, you're tapping into all these different forms of payment that your consumers in Latin America are used to paying with.
Yeah, and like something you just said there as well is that one of the big things that we've seen in fintechs in sort of like the last year is this idea of financial inclusion. So, how does payment localization really benefit financial inclusion and benefits beyond that as well?
So here at Pay Retailers, we take pride in this, right? We say that we're helping fight financial inclusion, and that's because we've made sure that in each one of the countries that we're operating in, we are accepting cash online solutions. For example, Boleto in Brazil. Oxo in Mexico, 7-Eleven in Mexico as well, right? And these are solutions that allow those that are underbanked, unbanked, that are living in a cash society where they're getting paid in cash, everything they're doing is in cash. It allows them to make those online purchases, right? So for it to not only be those that have a bank account to be able to buy a t-shirt online or to book a flight, right? How these payment options work, right, is at the checkout they're going to see, for example, Oxo in Mexico. It'll generate a code which then they will take to a physical location with cash at hand. They will pay at the physical location, and that'll call or trigger an API call to our system saying that this user has paid and the funds should be credited into their account. The transaction happens, and someone that typically would be excluded from making online transactions because they get paid in cash, because they live in a cash society, now has the opportunity to be included in these types of purchases. So it's something we take very serious here at Pay Retailers, and it goes to show with us integrating. I mean, just in Mexico, we have over 20 different forms of cash online solutions to make sure that everybody can participate.
So, discussing like payment gateways, when should startups really consider getting one of these and sort of acquiring one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're operating online, the first thing you need to do is get a payments gateway, depending on the region that you're going to be operating in. Now, when is it time to go into LATAM? I think that's a question for each and every online operator to understand when they are ready to go into new markets. However, Latam being such a huge market, I think there's so much opportunity. I mean, there's over 650 million people in Latin America. So I always like to say the more the merrier, the more options, the more markets, the more uh, ways you give your consumers to purchase, the higher your revenue is going to be, the more source of income you're going to have. And that's where Pay Retailers comes in, right? We help you fight the complexities of going into the Latin American market with a single agreement, single API, moving the funds back to wherever your bank account is, right? So there's not too much work to be done from an operator's perspective or from an online business perspective to be able to serve the Latin American market, and that's just an extra line of revenue for you.
I completely agree. I don't think anyone's ever complained about having too many options. I think the more options, the merrier, as you said. It just means, and it goes back to that point of financial inclusion. If you have more options, it just helps everyone. So I completely agree. So what are some challenges then, and some key considerations when installing and acquiring a payment gateway, and how long typically would it take to implement?
Absolutely. So our from pay retailers' perspective, our API is quite simple. So we allow our consumers to quickly get into this market from a regulatory standpoint, right? And then that's what a lot of companies are hesitant on attacking the Latin American market because of the complexities it has when it comes to regulation, getting money out. I mean, like I said earlier, each and every single country operates like a different planet. So understanding all these rules, all these regulations, all these different payment options can be a little bit overwhelming for retailers when they're going into the LATAM market, and that's why partnering with pay retailers gets rid of those complexities, right? It's listen, I want to go into Brazil, Mexico, Chile, and Peru, and we can set that up for you with a single API, with a single agreement, and have you up and running rather quickly. So I think that's a consideration to take when choosing your payments gateway, your payment service provider is the amount of options that it has, but also the expertise that it has in that market, especially in a market like Latin America. I mean, we have offices all over Latin America to be able to stay on top of the market. And I think that's quite important when choosing your payment service provider.
And that ties in perfectly with my next sort of point of discussion, is that obviously there are these complexities, but why is the Latin American market so different to the rest of the world? Is it just the complexities, or is there something else to it?
It's a region, right? That within the region, it's so different country by country. I mean, you look at the European market, right? And we have the euro, and everything is pretty much regulated very similarly between the regulation in Spain compared to the regulation in France and Portugal, in Germany. It's not going to change much, right? But when you look at Brazil, for example, what you can do in Brazil is completely different than what you could do to its neighbor with its neighbor in Argentina, right? So it's a lot of considerations you have to take into play when attacking this market, and I think it's very cultural. It's very political. To sum it up, I mean, just something so simple. You're talking about over 10 different currencies in this market. So where does the transaction happen? How do you change that into euros? How do you change that into USD? What are the rules and regulations in each one of those countries for taking money out of that country? I mean, it's quite complex, but I think just knowing that there's over 10 different currencies in this region, that sums up its complexity.
And do you think that's what the complexity makes it so attractive, is that there are these different sort of individual markets within the region?
Yes and no. I think what makes Latam so attractive, it's the size and the rapid pace at what at e-commerce and how it's growing in the region, right? I mean, let's talk sizes. Brazil, we're talking about over 200 million people just in Brazil. We're talking about over 120 million people in Mexico. It's a huge market, and it's growing rapidly. Last year we saw 37% increase in online transactions, right? So we're talking about a market that did about 85 billion in 2021, and experts are projecting this to double by 2025, right? So it's a market where there's so much opportunity, and if you do it correctly, it could mean it could be a significant impact on the revenue for e-commerce.
Yeah, for sure. And businesses that are looking to get into the market, what do you think they're missing by not getting involved?
Well, I mean, with the size of the market, one, revenue, right? I mean, it's an extra line of revenue. It's a market that's growing rapidly, and I think it's exciting to be part of that growth, right? We're talking about a market that did 85 billion last year. If the experts are correct, it'll be doing 160 billion by 2025. What is it going to be doing at 2030, right? The key thing that can be a mistake when going into the Latin American market is not accepting those local forms of payment, right? Thinking that you can operate with just your traditional debit card and credit card, because that's not the case in Colombia. As I mentioned, Pix in Brazil, PSC in Colombia, Spay in Mexico, WebPay in Chile. I mean, this having these options for your consumers online with the cultural tendencies in each one of the markets also allows the consumer to be safe, right? To say like, oh wow, they have Pix, so it's definitely something that I recognize. I can make the transaction via Pix, and it ultimately leads to conversion.
Yeah, and I think one of the most interesting things that you've just said there is this idea of new options. And on the topic of new options, if we look at what happened in El Salvador last year, we're looking at one of the biggest events in terms of adopting a new payment method, in that Bitcoin was made a legal tender in the country. And as we look at cryptocurrencies, obviously there's been, with cryptocurrencies, we could be here for a whole nother hour or something just discussing those in and of themselves. But how are cryptocurrencies and their adoption? Because obviously they need regulation in their own mind. That is why they have been so hot and cold. But how will the development of cryptocurrencies, and as these regulations take place, impact payment localization services? As the whole point of, or one of the main selling points of Bitcoin in El Salvador was for financial inclusion and making it something accessible. So how will it impact these localization services like pay retailers?
Yeah, I think you're so right, and like you said, we can spend hours and hours talking about cryptocurrencies, and obviously crypto is on the rise. It's I wouldn't even say it's the future. It's the present and the future. It's going to be really interesting to see how it shapes up from a regulatory perspective, and I think looking at the cryptocurrency regulation in Latin America, it goes in tandem with everything that happens in Latin America. And what do I mean by that, right? El Salvador now has adopted Bitcoin as one of their national currencies, right? But then you go to Bolivia, and Bitcoin is completely banned. It's not allowed. Cryptocurrencies are not allowed in this country. So eh, I think there's still a lack of regulation in Latin America. It's going to be very interesting to see how it shapes up with cryptocurrencies. But then again, it's a clear example of how complex the Latin American market is when you've got two completely polar opposite views in just one single region. I mean, it kind of sums up why LATAM can be so complicated without the right partner.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned regulations there, and obviously, as you mentioned earlier, even you were saying that regulations within each country, cryptocurrencies excluded, just talking about the base currencies, are one of the big problems in accepting local payments. Is that going to be a challenge, do you think, dealing with crypto regulation on top of the local payment regulations, or is it going to be something that sort of just happens and it all sort of fits together, if you know what I mean?
I think we still need some time to allow everything to shape up. I mean, in most countries, the regulation behind crypto is quite vague. I don't think they've really gotten together in understanding or putting laws into place, and we need to just wait and see what the political stand is, what the regulation says, because right now it's not that there's in many countries, it's not that there's a hard regulation. It's like there's no regulation yet. So it's just a matter of waiting and seeing how each and every single one of the countries in Latin America adopts it. And I can confidently say that we're going to be seeing a lot of discrepancies with neighboring countries. I mean, I'm sure Argentina is going to have a different take on it than Brazil, than Chile, than Peru, and I mean that goes back to what I've been speaking about pretty much this whole chat, right? Is it's hard to keep up with everything, and it's hard to make sure that as an online operator you're not only accepting the local forms of payment, but that you're keeping up with the regulation on each one of the markets, right? It's I mean, some clear examples. Ecuador has a 5% tax on any foreign exchange, or so any money that you're taking out of Ecuador. Not a lot of people know that. So you need to make sure that you're registered correctly, that you're paying this tax, obviously, before you get in trouble. And those are the things that we take off your hands, right? We make sure to establish everything according to each and every one of the markets that we operate in. And the reason how we've been able to do that is by having local people in each one of the markets. So we have compliance teams, we have legal teams, we have people that are working on product within the country, seeing these new payment options as they're coming in, including crypto, right? So if we're seeing that Brazil is going to have a good regulation with crypto, that they're going to be crypto friendly, we're going to be the first ones to integrate these crypto currency options, because we have a local team in Brazil studying the market and a local team in Brazil studying the regulation. I think that's really what differentiates us, and what is important to have in the Latin American market.
Do you think that's in and of itself going to be a challenge for you, in the sense that adopting these new regulations, because obviously cryptocurrencies are a thing in every single country, it's not just a specific one to each country. Do you think taking on that sort of burden of the extra regulation is going to be a big challenge and something that's going to be difficult to overcome?
I think that the way we have set up our local offices in each one of the countries, we're partnered with the fintech associations of multiple countries in Latin America. So we're always on top of what's coming, and I think we will not differentiate. It will not be anything different than a couple of years ago when Pix was starting to gain popularity. We studied Pix, we understood Pix, and we integrated it into our platform, right? So I think we're gonna take this step by step and see how it shapes up, and treat it as really what it is, another payment option for consumers online. I mean, I don't see it much different than, for example, a Pix or a PSE or a SPAY. It's another form of payment that people can use to pay online, and we're going to study it. We're going to stay on top of it the same way we have with all the other payment options.
I think that's great, to be honest, because I think there's this whole hype and sort of misunderstanding around crypto, because everyone thinks, oh, it's this crazy new digital thing. But I like the idea of it's just everything business as usual almost. It's just another payment type.
It's another way that consumers are going to want to pay online, and if we see that it's gaining popularity, or a specific cryptocurrency is gaining popularity in a certain country, we're gonna figure out the way to, by regulation and doing everything obviously correctly, integrate it into our platform and allow our merchants to allow their consumers to pay with that specific cryptocurrency. I mean, cryptocurrency goes far beyond just Bitcoin. Obviously, you know that. So we see it that way, right? It's what our consumers are asking for, or what are, let me shape that differently. What our merchants are hearing their consumers asking for, and then we integrate it to allow our merchants to accept that option by their consumer. But I mean, it's nothing new. It's the same way as another payment option.
Yeah, for sure. And so obviously cryptocurrencies is going to be a huge factor in going forward in the future, in your growth plan, in the roadmap. But how else are you going to continue to grow in the Latin American market?
So I think that our growth is happening by listening, right? So we have, and we are opening up more and more offices in each one of the markets that we operate, right? Peru, Costa Rica. We have a big office in Mexico, and the way for us to grow is to listen to our consumers, to listen to the different options that consumers are asking to pay with. Again, whether that be cryptocurrency, whether that be a new Pix that's coming out in Brazil and Mexico, anywhere. But the way that we're gonna keep growing is by expanding our product offering, by staying in touch with our roots, with our Latin American roots, in the sense that we're gonna have, and we're gonna keep having and growing teams in Latin America, to really understand and shape the market, and allow European companies to be able to accept, or African companies to be able to accept payments in Latin America. And growth, it's going to happen as the markets grow, and we're going to listen to our consumers. We're going to add new payment options. We're going to work on the super hot topic today, which is UX, right? I think user experience tied to conversion is hand in hand, and just growing and growing alongside our merchants.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess sort of tying up today's thoughts and discussions really is that are we looking, or is payment localization services looking to almost replicate the European market, do you think, in the sense that it is going to be an all-in-one service? It is just going to be almost a one-size-fits-all.
So that's what pay retailers is trying to do in a way, right? We're trying to take away all the complexities, all the burden, all the different setups that you need to do as a European company to accept payments in Latin America. But I don't believe that we will ever see some sort of one size fits all when it comes to the Latin American market without players like pay retailers, right? It's going to be nearly impossible to do it on your own without a payment service provider that allows you to have all these different options, one single integration, one service agreement, being able to transfer those funds, whether they're coming from Peru, Chile, Brazil, Argentina, putting all that together and then bringing it back to your bank account in Europe. I mean, the market is never, the Latin American market being so different country by country. I don't think it's ever going to get to a point how Europe is so tied together or in sync as a continent, right? There's always going to be different rules, regulations, payment options in each one of the countries in Latin America. And how I stated earlier, I mean, that's going to go back to cultural and political differences between each one of the countries.
And yeah, just tying up today's thoughts and discussion again, really is what are some thoughts for the future in regards to payment localization for pay retailers, but for competitors as well, and sort of how are you going to continue to separate and grow and sort of capitalize on that market figure that you said at the start, which I believe was double by 2025 of what it is now?
Yeah, absolutely right. I think what we need to do as a company in the Latin American market as it grows so much, like you mentioned, from 85 billion in 2021 to 160 billion in 2025, is to continue doing what we're doing in the sense that we are listening to the country, listening to the consumers, and having local people partnering up with all the fintech associations, understanding from an in-ground perspective what each country represents from a payments perspective and from an online consumer perspective, and make sure that we offer all the online bank transfer solutions, that we offer all the digital wallets that are gaining popularity, all the different cash online options, and allowing our merchants to rest assured that any type of payment option that you need to be successful in a specific country in Latin America, it's going to be through our API. It's going to be integrated there, and we'll do that by growing our teams locally.
I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to see what pay retailers and sort of payment localization can really achieve in the next few years. I think it's going to be something, that's for sure. So thank you ever so much for taking the time to speak to me, Jose. I've learned a lot and I've really enjoyed our conversation. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the future.
No, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure speaking with the FinTech Times. So I appreciate it, and we will talk or we'll see how this shapes up in 2025.
Yeah,
See if it reaches.
We'll have another chat in 2025 and we'll be like, remember that chat we had in 2023? Thanks again, Jose.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the FinTech Times podcast. We hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as we did. Don't forget to check us out at thefintechtimes.com and subscribe to our monthly publication to keep up to date with all the latest fintech news.